Welcome, I'm Dennis Doyle. Let me ask you a fairly simple question. Why do you think Christians are Christians? In other words, what is it they think Christianity offers them? Don't you think in one form or another most Christians are Christians because they want to go to heaven, not hell? If I'm correct, isn't it odd that Christians don't talk much about heaven and hell? I mean, if that is really what Christianity is all about, wouldn't you think Christians would spend a lot of time talking about those two places, the one they want to get to and the one they want to avoid? I think the reason Christians don't talk about heaven and hell is they don't know what heaven is, and they don't even want to think, much less discuss, hell. To figure out heaven and hell, I think you must first figure out who is the God that created heaven and hell. When I was young and first read the Old Testament, I thought God was one tough hombre. I must have read the story of the Jews' exodus from Egypt 10 times, trying to sort out if what I was reading was the way it really happened. Here are the Jews living in captivity and slavery for 350 years under the thumb of the Pharaoh, and God, using Moses, sets them free. But what happens to them after he gives them freedom? They wander around the desert for 40 years, about 2 generations of people at that time, and none of them but 2, not born in Egypt, made it to the Promised Land. The rest of them, all of whom were emancipated from slavery in Egypt, died on the floor of the desert. Why did it happen this way? Because the Jews lost their faith in Moses and God. They were constantly complaining and second-guessing, to a point that God got fed up with them and said, I am not going to give you what I had planned on giving you, because you are an ungrateful lot. As I said, that God was one tough hombre. If I based my perception of heaven and hell and who goes where on that God, not many of us would get where we want to go. But Christ entered the world to establish a new kingdom. He showed compassion, forgiveness, charity, sacrifice, a lot of things I never saw in his Father. So as I have focused on this person, Jesus, and tried to understand him, I have come to the conclusion that he is love. Everything I know about great human love, I see in Jesus. And when I say Jesus is love, I do not mean he represents love. I mean he is love. Now that I told you I see Jesus as love, let me go back to the question of how I now see heaven and hell. Heaven is being with love, surrounded by, overwhelmed by love. Hell is an absence of love. You may have experienced an absence of love when you were growing up or in a relationship. If that has been your lot in life, you have glimpsed hell. Hell is not a state of being where you will feel physical pain, but where you will feel great loss and loneliness. Heaven, like hell, is a state of existence, but there you will feel great, overwhelming love. But let me go one step further. Both heaven and hell are variable states of being. None of our states of being in either circumstance will be the same. And the variation in each of our eternal lives will in part be a function of the types of lives we have each led. Look at it this way. Each of us has now formed a different relationship with God. It varies up or down the scale. Throughout life, we exercise our free wills, and the totality of our lives represents our gift or rejection of God. The relationship we have with God when we depart earth determines whether we show up at the door of heaven or hell. We consign ourselves to the threshold of either door. But remember, God is love. You recall how when the prodigal son showed up destitute on his father's doorstep, his father forgave him and loved him beyond reason? God can do the same for us. No matter which door we consign ourselves to, God meets us there, and he can do with us whatever he wants. God's love and mercy are so unpredictable and boundless, he can choose to change or enhance our self-directed destiny. But you nor anyone else can predict our eternal state of being, since no one can predict the breadth and action of God's love and mercy. And one final point. This eternal life I have just described as wondrous as it can be, all came about because God created us. And it was that creative act that made all God has offered us possible. And that is why we say human life is sacred. What could be more sacred than a divinely inspired, eternal being that has the potential to live a magnificent life with his Creator? These are my thoughts. What is important to me is, what is your vision of heaven? And explain to me the process by which we get there. And thanks for your input.